Hi, Joshua. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this. I really enjoyed the book.
Oh,
I
good.
a lot of it resonated for me, I have to say, and I did also appreciate the anecdotes and kind of how you wove your own story into it, and the survey results, and the reflective questions, which of course a lot of what I do is train, and so I always like when you have sort of that anchor to go back and question yourself about what you've just kind of consumed. So I thought that was all great. I do have to tell you, I took your question to heart that if I were to die today, is there something that I would not be too happy about not having completed? And that struck me because it's true. For the couple of years, I've been having a challenge finishing a book. It keeps getting set to the side,
Ah.
and it's really due to distractions. So thank you for getting me back on track. I wanted to start out today. We're going to talk about the 8 areas that you cover in the book. But first, I thought it was interesting because, and I confess to this, you state that we blame technology for most of our uh, distractions, and that's true. But you talk about how we've had those distractions since the beginning of man. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, interesting. Even a little bit of my like Strengths Finders test that I took way back when. One of my, I don't know, strengths or one of my um, themes in life is that I tend to look to the past to define where we are in the present. And so, honestly, like one of the biggest questions that I always think about when someone brings up a new problem or a new issue, I'm like, is this really the first time that we've ever dealt with this issue? And so, thinking about technology and when I mention the title of the book, Things That Matter: Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life, most people think of technology. Okay, good, you're going to help me put my phone down or stop scrolling social media. And there's a chapter in the book certainly about that, but I think to myself, I assume people were having the same conversation when television first came out. Like, how much of a distraction has television become? Or when radio was first invented, and like, oh man, now we're just sitting around listening to things on the radio rather than out doing, making a difference in the world. And so, certainly not a new distraction. I think that we've always struggled with distractions from the most important things in life, but it feels, like it's certainly more prevalent than ever before. But the book is certainly about a lot more than technology, as you know.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's get into these 8 areas that you cover. There's obviously other distractions, but you focus on 8 that I thought were really important. Um, let's start with the first one. So, how does fear distract us?
Yeah. Um, I start with when I originally imagined the book, Things That Matter. The distractions that I wanted to cover were the distraction of possessions, the distraction of money, the distraction of fame, or accolades, I call it, the distraction of leisure. Like, these were the external things that we can pursue with our lives, desire more of all the time, and then that we begin sacrificing living lives of meaning by pursuing those different distractions. So that was what I originally pictured the book. My first conversation with my editor brought about the second chapter, which is regret, past mistakes. But my first conversation with a friend of mine is what brought about the chapter on fear. We are driving in a car. We are actually going to Mexico. I started a nonprofit down there. And so he's the executive director. We were going down to work. And I said, hey, I want to write this book about how sometimes things keep us from pursuing lives of meaning or lives that we end our lives with a bunch of regrets. And I said, what do you think is the biggest distraction that keeps people from pursuing a meaningful life? And without hesitation, he said, fear. Um, and not just fear of getting started. In his context, he was talking about fear of losing what you have. Um, uh, and so he began explaining that to me, and I'm like, you are totally right. Like, this is a big issue that in my mind I didn't even think about. So all that to say, the first two chapters, fear and regret, came from conversations with other people. But um, yeah, there's a good that we can bring into the world, and this book is all about identifying what is that good that we can bring into the world. And if we're afraid of losing what we have, if we're afraid of failing in that pursuit, if we're afraid of succeeding sometimes even in that pursuit, then it can keep us from living our most meaningful, most fulfilled lives if we don't address that and overcome, or at least understand how it might be affecting us.
Yeah, I appreciated that you included a list of 5 signs that fear might be the problem. And it's interesting from my perspective, because a lot of people may not recognize that fear, they may recognize, oh, something makes them nervous, but they may not recognize that thought process is continuously distracting them, right? And so I appreciated that you put something in there for people to really go through and say, oh, is this a problem for me? So that they can address it and then do something about it.
It was, man, I learned a ton in studying this topic and getting ready for that. And could even go back and recognize some different ways that fear had been holding me back in life. I interviewed a friend of mine who says that his story's in the book. He said that fear has kept him from succeeding in life, in that he always was afraid of failing. Kind of got that from his parents, he would say. But whenever he started succeeding in an organization and being promoted in an organization, that didn't squelch his fear of failing. He said it made it even worse. Like the higher I got promoted in a company, the greater I was afraid of failing in the new role that I was. And he said it's sabotaged every good job I've ever had. And so um, it was interesting to think about it in new ways.
Absolutely. Um, Another distraction you cover is past mistakes. So, could you give us a suggestion or some tips on how we can overcome sort of hanging out in the past and how that distracts us from what we're trying to do?
Um, I did a survey for the book, and this was the most heartbreaking for me of all the survey results. 61% of people say they're held back from the future they want because of past mistakes they've committed in the past. 55% of people say they're held back from the future they want because of past mistakes committed against them. And mistakes, as I say in the book, sometimes doesn't do the evil justice that was done to us. But it's a catch-all word that I use. And man, I was sitting in my office when the results came back and got to that one, and literally I got emotional thinking about like how many of us feel like we can't live the life that we want or have the future that we want because of something we did in the past or something that someone did to us in the past. And that is just so much bottled up potential. Um, it's probably the one chapter. Most chapters in the book could be a book by themselves, but this is probably the one chapter that could be a whole bookshelf all by itself in a bookstore or in a library. How do we overcome that regret, and how do we overcome past mistakes? Um, the call that I make in the book is that we we have to face it. Like, we can't keep running from it. We can't allow it to handicap our future. We can't just say it is what it is, and I'm never going to overcome it. But at some point, we need to turn and face it. We need to turn and face the problem, knowing that we can't change the past, but we can learn from it, and we can become. Our future might be different than what we thought it was going to be because of that mistake, but it doesn't have to keep us from the future that is the most beneficial for us and for others.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's important, even in mindfulness, to recognize that while the emphasis is staying focused on the present moment, if you haven't resolved whatever those past issues are, they're going to creep in anyway. So, from a mindfulness perspective, it's the same. It's we need to deal with it in some way so that we can clear it out and really, enjoy our lives and pursue our goals. And so I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, I think this one may be surprising to people, but one of the distractions you cover in the book is happiness. And this, I have to tell you, is probably my favorite chapter in the book because you talk about being of service, and that's really a driving force for me. But can you share with our listeners how and why happiness becomes a distraction?
Yeah. As I describe it in the book, it's about where we're pursuing happiness. We're all going to pursue happiness one way or another, and we're going to pursue self, just survival. Like it's pretty like both pursuits are common, I think, to us as humans. The problem becomes when we conflate the two, and when we begin to look for the pursuit of happiness in the pursuit of self, and we think that they're the same. And when we start to think, hey, me getting everything I want is how I'm going to be the happiest in my life. When in reality, every study that's ever been done shows that people who help others, people who serve others, people who are generous with what they have, people who are passionate about solving a problem and living for others, every study shows that they get to the end of their lives and self-report feeling more fulfilled, more satisfied, more happy, more joyful than those who thought they were going to find happiness in just the pursuit of acquiring things for themselves.
Yeah, I've read a lot of those studies too, and consistently, even in the giving of something, the giver has a stronger reaction, even on fMRIs in the brain that light up the pleasure
Yep.
areas of the brain, because it is rewarding, in addition to being, I think, something that we all need to do, but it's also
Yeah.
rewarding to the self to
Yeah.
give to others. So
Indeed. Indeed. And that's not to discount self-care. I mean, that's not to discount taking care of ourselves. For me, it's just, what is the motivation? Like, I care for myself so that I can help others is different than I just care for myself so I can help myself all the time. And those who recognize self-care plays a role, but the role is you can't pour from an empty cup, is the old saying. So I invest into myself so that I can be the best investment into others that I can as well.
exactly. All right, the next one, money, money, money.
Yeah.
I just did a podcast on materialism. How does money distract us from a meaningful life?
So 80% of Americans say they will be happier if they have more money. And 77% of Americans say that their desire for money influences their decisions on an almost daily basis. And it's always been a pretty fascinating statistic to me, that survey result. The other one is the fact that 90% of Americans say that they have financial related stress. And it is true that there are some people that don't have enough money, but it is not 90% of Americans. I mean, we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, statistically speaking. And to think that 90% of us are stressed about money when we have more money and more stuff than at any point in the history of humankind, really just sends me into like, why is that the case? And the realization to me is that we don't solve our desire for money by getting more money. 87% of millionaires don't describe themselves as wealthy. Boston College did a study of the ultra wealthy, net worth of 78 million on average. And when they asked if they had enough money, the most popular answer was no, I need 25% more. And at some point, we we need to realize that it's not that we don't have enough money. It's just that we keep looking for money to bring us happiness and bring security. And it's never going to provide in enough amount those things for us. And we have to look elsewhere. And when we can get to the point, I mean, just imagine if you can get to the point where you can say, hey, I have enough money coming in. I don't have to constantly need and want more and more and more. Like, just think how freeing that would be, how much more you could focus your life on other things if you weren't constantly desiring more and more money. The old Bible verse is the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And I always say, no one admits to loving money. Everybody just wants more of it. And I think that I think that it's more of a trap than we think it is in our lives.
Yeah, I personally, when I was young, had that idea. We just need to make more money, then we'll be happy. And over decades, we've had money, we've not had money. And I can tell you, when you have it, you still keep thinking, well, I just need a little more. I just need a little more. And when you don't have it, you figure out how you get by with less money. And of course, we're not talking about people at the poverty level. We're talking about, like you said, the majority of Americans who probably do have enough money, but we're just conditioned to think that it's going to solve our problems. And it's not the answer. It's icing to me on the cake. It's not going to make it life more meaningful necessarily. Although depending on what you do with the money, you could make maybe your life more meaningful by, like you did, starting a foundation or doing something like that. But
yeah, there is, I highlighted a little bit in the book, but I don't think we talk enough about the negative drawbacks of having money. We always think money only brings good into our lives, or we can picture the negative temptations if I don't have any money. But the reality is there are new temptations. There are new traps that come with having more money: arrogance, isolation, lack of empathy, loneliness. Like, all these things come with wealth. And yet, if you ask anybody if they want to be rich, they would all say yes. And most people, we discount the negative nature of wealth in our lives. And so I hope to draw a little attention to that in the book.
Yeah, no, I thought you did a great job of really explaining it and including, again, the scientific evidence of what happens the wealthier you get. So yeah, it's money is not good or bad. Like, as you mentioned, it's just basically what we do with it. Now, kind of in the same vein is possessions. And I cannot say I'm a minimalist. I know that you are. But I will say, as I've grown more mindful, I can see a shift toward really changing my attitude about possessions. And so in this household now, I'm constantly looking, is that functional? Does that help me in some way? And if it doesn't, I can't even tell you how many truckloads over the past few years I have donated out, because I don't want the stuff that's taking up my time or distracting me. And I also have a rule in this household that if something new's coming in, something has to go out so that I never accumulate too much stuff in here. But I want to know if you can explain to our listeners, like, how in the world can stuff distract us from a meaningful life?
Yeah, most people don't realize how much of a burden their possessions have become until we begin to remove them. We are told, we see 5,000 advertisements every single day, and every single advertisement tells us we'll be happier if we buy whatever they're selling. And even though none of us would ever say, I'm looking for happiness in the things that I buy, most of us live like we are. We wish we had a bigger house. We wish we had a nicer car. We wish we had more clothes. We wish we had newer technology, this or the newest fashions, like this and that. And we're just constantly not just accumulating things that we don't need, but how much energy goes into pursuing those things that we don't need. just things that we have to bring home and clean and organize and manage and maintain. And so there's really like a two-prong distraction that possessions can become when we own more than we need. They steal time and energy just cleaning and organizing all the time. And when we desire more than we need, then we just like kind of running in the back of our mind all the time. Like I want more. What's the sale? What's the sale that Kohl's has going on this week? Where can I make the money to buy this thing? What's the best deal that I can get? What did so and so buy? And I wish I had. And really, I think just keeps us from more meaningful pursuits.
Okay, it's time consuming. I mean, that's really how I started. It's like, why am I spending all this time dusting frames or I don't know, knick-knacky things on a shelf? And yeah, so I've been on a massive clean out
Feels good.
mission.
Feels
It
good,
does
doesn't
feel
it?
good. Yes. I'm
Feels
much
good.
happier. And I also can't stand not being able to find something. And I
Yeah.
don't have that problem now because the problem was too much stuff. So, you know, so you have to dig through things. So I'm totally on board. I'm not all the way. I think I'm probably going to end up a minimalist at some point, but I think that's the direction I'm heading. Um, you quote Jim Carrey as saying, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. This is related to the distraction of applause, or what you call the distraction of applause. So could you talk about that a little bit? Because in our times, I think this is a big one.
It is, especially in a world where seems like ordinary people go viral at any random notice, and anybody can become famous, or anybody can become an influencer on social media, and it certainly is an issue. I can see it in my own life. Really, this chapter was born out of my own. Once I kind of overcame the desire for possessions and started rethinking about the role of money in my life, uh, accolades and praise and reputation became the next one that I could see tripping me up. Where sometimes the greatest good that we can bring into the world for the greatest number of people isn't going to draw any attention, and isn't going to draw any notoriety, isn't going to draw any praise. But when I live my life constantly needing praise, constantly wanting to be noticed, um, then sometimes that keeps me from doing the thing that I'm most equipped to do in the world. And that's not to say there are some professions, there are some roles in the world, there are some personality types, there are some things of good that we can bring into the world that are going to require attention and are going to require being known, and there are some things that we can do and accomplish that will naturally result in praise and being acknowledged by other people. But when the goal becomes wanting to be noticed, wanting to be praised, that this is when I think we make sacrifices along the way that lead to regret at the end of life.
Yeah, it's amazing whether it's a person or whether it's their pet or whether it's I hear the craziest things. I don't actually go on social media, but it's it, it, it's amazing to me that we're replacing actual value or gratitude with what's happening online. So the followers or the thumbs up or whatever it is, and it's to me, I don't know how you couldn't have regrets at some point because it's not it doesn't feel like it's a substantial or long lasting sort of appreciation. It's in that instant you've amused me or taught me something or whatever it is. And over years, it's too new now, but I just think over years we're going to see more detrimental effects on our psyches from this because you can't be you can't stay famous. You can't get a million or whatever it is to go viral. I think whatever, but you know what I mean? Like on TikTok. So if you've gone viral and you've got millions of people watching, they're not going to watch 10 years from now, whatever you're doing. You know what I mean? It's just like a flash in the pan, I guess is kind of what I'm thinking. And it concerns me for people's mental health, not maybe now because they're completely enjoying that short-lived fame or whatever it is. But
I think it is. I think what you'll find is that there are a lot of quick and easy ways to to go viral, to become famous right away and get followed for a while. But the people who are gonna um, the character traits that result in lasting influence probably haven't changed today than they did 50, 60, 100 years ago. Like there are still the just the universal common traits of honesty and selflessness and integrity and love. You know, like those are the things that are going to sustain your influence. And if you give those up for the quick flash in the pan notoriety, then it's going to go as quickly as it came.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you stated at the beginning, we're not talking about someone who's doing something as part of their purpose or their vision or their mission and trying to do whatever the goal is versus somebody who is solely focused on what can I do right now to get more followers or be more liked or be more famous. So it's got to do with really the reason you're doing what you're doing. If it happens and
Yep.
because it happens, that's not the same thing that we're talking about. So
Exactly.
um here's one that I was surprised by too. It's the distraction of leisure. And I guess it surprised me because I am not a pursuer of leisure. I love my work, as you mentioned in the book, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of what I'm doing. And I start, I don't know, seeking leisure when I feel run down or tired as a way to recharge and so that I can go back to doing what I do. But I didn't realize it was such a common notion that it's an objective, that there's a lot of people who that's the sole objective, get the job done so that you can, do leisurely activities. So I'm wondering if you can share the two primary ways leisure becomes a distraction in our society.
Oh, I'm trying. I assume retirement must be one of them. And then what was the other one that I mentioned?
It's about work, that the reason we work.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's the whole notion that work has somehow become a four-letter word in America, or just the idea that retirement as the goal of work. CNN had an article a couple of years ago that called "Early Retirement: The New American Dream," and I think when the goal of work becomes getting out of work as soon as I possibly can, then there's no joy and there's no meaning to be found in it because it's just the thing I'm trying to do so I can stop doing it. But meanwhile, I think that there's a selfless way to view work and what we do. I mean, much of what I'm sure you just mentioned here and what you probably talk about before, but the greatest good that you can bring into the world is going to require you to work hard and embrace effort and not do it for selfish reasons. I don't do my work well so that I can get rich. I don't do my work well so that I can buy the biggest house and eat at the fanciest restaurants, but I do my work well because in doing what I do well, I love other people. I serve other people. I free up other people so they can do what they do well, which in turn benefits all of society going forward. So really seeing work as love, I think, is far more fulfilling than it's just the thing that I do for the paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing to me. A lot of people have asked me over the years, well, when are you going to retire? Have you got any plans? And I don't have a retirement plan because I can't imagine what I would do all day. Now, that's not to say there's anything wrong with taking a vacation or taking a break, or again, self-care is important. But I think it really does have to do with, you know, a shift in thinking because that age, 65 was the original age in the US. That, okay, first of all, life expectancy is longer than that now. But secondly, why? Like, why wouldn't you want to keep being with people and doing what you love doing? And if you don't love it, I guess that is the problem. But
I just heard yesterday the life expectancy was 64 when Social Security was first enacted, and it was just to take care of poverty really late in life, and like there's something to be said for transition. Like I can't I can't do construction when I'm 70 years old anymore, or I can't run at the same pace that I did when I was in my 30s and 40s. But
sure.
but to think that I'm entirely going to stop helping and serving and working. My grandpa always says the best fruit grows on the most mature trees. And I think just, realizing that we still have a lot to offer.
Yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be a paid job. It could be volunteering. It
Yep.
could be all kinds of things. But that chapter really opened my eyes, because to think that you would only work for X number of years just so that you can stop working is so alien to me. But
Yeah.
obviously, a lot of people are doing that. And then I don't know what happens when they retire and they still live another 18 years or whatever it is, and they don't have that purpose, I guess, anymore. So very interesting. Um, okay. I know we're actually going to go a little over, but we've got to talk about technology, because my listeners know, not that I don't think technology isn't helpful. I use it every day, but most of the time I think it's a complete distraction from happiness, relationships, work, everything across the board. So talk to us about this one. And if you don't mind, maybe you could also include just a little bit about your idea about detoxing.
Yeah. So I'll try to do this quick if
Oh, take your time.
because I no because I'm sure you talk about it well. I agreed about the benefits of technology. I always think it's most helpful to think of technology creation versus consumption. Like I can use technology in a way that creates good. I can go on social media. I can compliment people. I can raise awareness for issues that I'm passionate about solving. I can bring about benefit, positivity into other people's lives, or I can just endlessly scroll and waste hours. I could go play another 10 levels of Candy Crush. I could go binge another season of something on Netflix and just let life pass me by, rather than taking the opportunity and using technology as a tool to bring about good in the world. And so I think that's how I've always tried to view it. Like not that there's nothing wrong with watching a television show, or I sat down with my son last night and watched a basketball game, and like there's some benefit to that. But I think recognizing, okay, I'm just consuming, or I'm wasting creation opportunity by just consuming. And I've done it yearly. I go on a tech fast anytime from 2 weeks to 40 days was the most I've ever gone, and just like separate myself entirely as best I can. If I'm working during the time, then I'm still on email, I suppose, during the day. But for 40 days, I use my phone just for phone and text, and I didn't even use the map feature when I was driving somewhere. I'd look it up and write it down. Like just 40 days of nothing on my phone except for phone and text, and just email once a day, whatever it was. I don't remember the specific parameters, but for me, I just find, and then the goal isn't that I never return to my phone, but the goal is I can recognize how much time I wasted. I can even recognize, okay, the maps thing was actually pretty beneficial to me. Let's do that. The social media stuff and the games were just taking me away from my family rather than bringing benefit to my life. So it's always been helpful to me. And literally, I do it every year. I'll be doing it the first 2 weeks of August this year.
And how much better do you feel after that detox? I mean, what's the difference for you?
Yeah, it's always helpful during the time. What you focus on in your life is what tends to grow. And so where you spend your time during that is always helpful. But for me, then it's always the re-entry. I think I never go back into scrolling as much as I did before. It's like, you know what? Why would I do that? Oh, okay, it's a little helpful at times to check on things, but not as much as it was before. And then you just fall into bad habits and think you need to refresh again. Especially even as life changes, life season changes, and the role of technology in our lives should change as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So at the end of the book, you talk about the challenges of breaking away from the herd by overcoming these common distractions. And you do point out there's other distractions, obviously, but these do seem like pretty common distractions for all of us. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for how someone can start shifting their life if they want to start small, if they don't want to feel overwhelmed, like maybe all of these things are distracting them. So, what would you recommend to just maybe a baby step, something to get started, in addition to, of course, reading the book? But what would you suggest? Where to start?
I would probably recommend. Um, yeah, that's a good question. I would say if someone's listening, we just went through all eight. I would think if there were any one of them that really stuck out to you, like when you were listening and you're like, oh, he's really, that is a big one in my life. I've never considered before. I've never thought about it before. I would, put a pin on that and kind of think about it. If it's fear or if it's regret or if it's money, and just for the next week, kind of think about it and notice it. Oh man, here I am focusing on money. Here I am trying to figure out this side hustle that can make more money, or ooh, I think I was afraid to go talk to that person. That's that fear creeping up again. I would just open myself up to noticing it in your life a little bit more, and start to um, pick up how it might be distracting you more than you thought.
Well, that's a perfect answer on a mindfulness program.
I
And
was gonna say, just
it's
being a little bit more mindful of the distraction in the topic.
yeah. And then again, you don't have to change everything at once. The first step is being aware, in my opinion. The second step is what's one small thing you can do to start shifting it. And then you'll find it's kind of like going on the detox from the technology. You think you can't do it. You can't go one day. And the longer you go, the more it's like, this is not that hard once you really
Yeah,
start doing it. So
yeah.
well, again, I really enjoyed the book, and I really appreciate you joining us today to share all of this information and all of these tips and techniques. So, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.